I don't know. I think I put myself to sleep with that one, but trying to be a little less crazy today. How y'all doing? See if I can turn off the music. All right, welcome to the Lookout, where we're trying to defrazzle our brains after a crazy couple days with some sleepy old country music. I think I might stick with the funk because I don't want to fall asleep on you guys. Anyway, welcome to the Lookout, California Fire Report. We're going to wander around. Today was a really busy day all over California for firefighters. And from the outside, from the webcams and everything else, nothing really happened, right? Like people worked really hard today all over the map. Kept waiting for something to kind of blow up this afternoon. And it didn't. Really, there's a lot going on. But yesterday was the crazy day with lots of things blowing up and getting fast quickly and burning down towns. And today was a little more stable. Smoke kind of capped in on a lot of fires. A lot of these fires, a lot of these lightning strikes we've had over the last couple of days came with moisture. And so lots of little duffers smoking around. So we're just going to kind of work our way up from the Garnet fire. We're going to end up on the Klamath. And let's do it. I thank you guys all for joining us. And start off down here on Garnet. All right, Garnet fire. So this is kind of what the Garnet fire looked like all day today. It's kind of socked in. Buddy of mine who spent a lot of time working on Sierra, he said, I think this fire is going to go out pretty soon. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, it rained a bit and it kind of, burned up through tea kettle and not doing much today. So I was like, well, let's wait a couple of days. So I'm not ready for it to go out because then all of my criticism of the team for being too optimistic would be in vain. Anyway, it's a problem with making predictions. So we're looking at Delilah Lookout right now, kind of at the bottom corner of the fire, and kind of the most interesting view of the fire today. This is Buck Rock. So these ones that are at a distance are a little harder to see, but this one here, this view of the fire. So here's an image taken of the fire yesterday, which is a freaking amazing image, I think. And it ends kind of right at the bottom of the fire. This end of the fire, south end of the fire on the Garnet here, we're east of Fresno on the Sierra National Forest. And so yesterday this image was captured kind of right at noon. And the fire was just thrashing through finishing gobbling up the tea kettle experimental forest. So we've been talking for days here about tea kettle and this area in green here being the tea kettle reserve, 3,000 acres that's supposed to get burned by some folks that got a big contract from the state to save a bunch of carbon from going in the atmosphere. And this here is a lot of carbon changing from tree form into atmospheric CO2. So they didn't accomplish what they were trying to do, which was to keep that carbon stored up, safe. Anyway, so noon yesterday, this fire is just, it's rare to see this much kind of heat all in one kind of, like the depth of the flaming front here at noon was like the fire was active, about a mile across. So this red line out here is where the fire was last night. And what's interesting about this image is you see that the previous day, the perimeter from the night of the 1st is here. And that before that, down in here in the kind of steeper, more diverse kind of topography of the tea kettle, like it's not out of the question that there's going to be some trees that survived in here, even though we watched kind of column-driven fire burn through here for a couple days. When we look at our kind of shortwave IR imagery that we use to see if trees survived or not, there's still some green out there. So it's a chance that some of these enormous sugar pine and other old growth that made this place a place people wanted to work to save, there may still be some big trees out there, which is nice for the future, for seeding in the future forest. Up here, probably not so much. Probably got some serious black stick action. So the fire pushed out hard. This is at noon, like I said, this image. And then last night or yesterday afternoon, maybe they fired off along parts of the road here, the McKinley Grove Road, which is something they've been talking about doing. That's kind of a part of the strategy, is to keep it south of McKinley Grove Road. So they fired here yesterday along the road. And there's also this kind of major transmission, like power line corridor. There are some spots out here. And so this is, it's not a done deal yet that they'll hold the fire on the road. But today it seemed pretty subdued. Down here, the fire, there's still these kind of spots down here, Long Meadow, kind of still a bit off of Wishon Reservoir. Fire yesterday also, so the white line is 24 hours of spread. So the fire also pushed hard up kind of towards Sugar Pine Hill here on the east side of the fire. I think that their box over here is this kind of road system. So far this side of the fire was still within the kind of contingency box. And the part that's kind of one of the wild cards of this fire is over here kind of between Indian Rock and Dinky Creek. So on the camera here, if we look at Fence Meadow camera, we're looking kind of across at Indian Rock. And this afternoon, you can see the fire's kind of been backing down into the canyon here. Dinky Creek's in the bottom. There's been some runs up and out of the canyon. The big concern is the fire coming up this way. And so today, the atmosphere is a bit capped and the fire's backing. And I think one of the interesting things you see in this image also is this line up here. Oh, that's not the arrow. Let's do this one. Up here, you see the fire kind of backing downhill here. And anytime you have opportunity for a fire to back down a hill, even if the timber is really heavy, so we're seeing basically this area down here, the kind of west side of Tea Kettle, backing downhill. And so that's one benefit of, so yeah, we got a lot of fire on the ground here. But one of the nice things about this weather changing and the fire kind of backing downhill and filling in here is that you might actually get some nice fire effects. And this land, just remember, is all overgrown and desperate for treatment and thinning. And so anytime that you get good outcome from a wildfire, it's a good outcome in general, because it's so hard for the Forest Service to get projects done at scale. So if you do have a wildfire and half of it's low severity or moderate severity fire, that's the way that the work's getting done, one way or another, is mainly by wildfire. So there's still kind of this kind of wild card of you get the steep, gnarly canyon of Dinky Creek on the west side of the fire. With the weather cooperating, there's potential for them to they've already gone direct on portions of this and held it for days. But as it's backing down through here, they might pick it up here on the 24 road, and they're going to, at least for now, they're getting some good fire effects. The other thing that's happening that makes it more likely that they'll hold it on the north end is just that the fire's now backing downhill here as well. So you can see where they fired it here. It's a place where the fire is backing downhill. Now the problem is if there's spot out in here, and if the fire continues to spot out in here, then once again the fire could eventually run north. And this McKinley Grove Road is kind of mid-slope for a lot of the areas north of the fire. So it's by no means out, but it did lay down today. And the team has basically conducted these firing operations along this road and along this road here in an attempt to build a containment for the fire on this north end. And that's about all we got for Garnet. These areas where the white is on the edge are places the fire hasn't spread for a day. So there's still some difficult geography in play. All right. So, you see all these red dots on the fire? These are all state of California, and these are all fires. And some of them have are kind of stale, meaning that they're little fires that got put out a while ago, and then other ones are kind of active. So let's turn off the label so we can actually see the dots themselves. All right, so what happened yesterday was we talked about it. There was, there's a low pressure system off the coast here, and we had low pressure here that was moving in, and we know that storms circulate around a low in the northern hemisphere. That means that they kind of do this, and so that means the air kind of blows in like this. And so as this is moving this way, and it's drawing in moisture, it's hitting the Sierra Nevada mountains here and having to go up and over the mountains. And when that happens, the air rises, it cools off, it condenses, and that's where you get rain, and that's where you get kind of convection, is like these storms interacting with the topography. So anyway, you got along this kind of boundary of the moisture, the uplift, and the circulation around the low. We had this lightning storm basically that moved like all the way up the low country of the Sierra Nevada. And the fires that really kicked ass yesterday were down here in Tuolumne Calaveras, kind of a little bit on the east side of Fresno County. So let's just see if we can pull up those fires. So we had a fire here at Chinese camp, that the 6.5 fire, and that these fires just kind of hauled ass. As soon as the storm moved through, it got sunny again, and it was hot and dry and windy. And so this fire blew kind of right into the town of Chinese camp. And which isn't much of a town, but it's concentration of where people live, and a lot of destruction kind of concentrated in this little town. And I don't think we have a current perimeter. Let's see. There you go. So that's the perimeter of the 6.5 fire. And you can see kind of it started, it ran, and then it kind of backed out to the sides as well. So if you live down here and you lost your place, sorry to hear it. Look bad. A guy I know is out there taking photos, got some really incredible imagery of just of the action. They kept it from burning up Sierra Pacific sawmill here. So that's a 6.5, and a lot of these fires being kind of low elevation, they get put out pretty quick. You got some dozers, you got some aircraft, you get some people and fire trucks, mobile attack. Folks in this country fight fire in grasslands and low fuels all day long and are really good at it. And so a lot of these fires were done yesterday. There were a lot of fires popping. The fact that more of them didn't get large is a real testament to just how good our firefighters are at doing this kind of work. Over here around Murphy's, this I think it was maybe the 2.7 fire, and they pretty much pinned it in. And when you look at the landscape and where this fire could have gone, had it continued to move up slope, like this is also they got impressive amount of firefighting that happened yesterday. That when you look at like just all these little starts all over the map, just the organization required to kind of like make sure people know where they are, that they're going there, who's on first, all that. It's amazing that there weren't more losses. So as we continue north, none of these fires, kind of Sacramento County, any of these grew large yesterday or today. Quite a few starts kind of in the low country here of Yuba County and even into Butte County, around Oregon House and Dobbins. Like we said, like quite a few of these starts had rain with them. One thing we were watching today is there's some starts up in the high country on the Tahoe National Forest, and there's 4 starts up in the Yuba. And so I was watching those kind of all day because, we look a lot at our fire history map of the Sierra Nevada, and we've been talking a lot about how much the Sierra Nevada has burned now, and that we worry a lot about these places that have not had fire that we know will have fire. So like the Yuba River watershed here, no fires for 100 years. Down here, kind of around Arnold, up above Arnold and Twainhart, on the Stanislaus and portions of the El Dorado, like no fires for 100 years. Like, just, we know the fuels are really bad, and we know that when you have fires in places that haven't had fire for 100 years, you get something like the Caldor, or the Bear Fire, or the Dixie Fire, the Mosquito Fire, the King Fire. Like, our big fires run in continuous areas that haven't had fires for a long time. So whenever I see new starts in a place that has no fire history, I was watching these a lot today. So these fires above Downeyville, there is fire history here, but it's like 1899, 1987. Like, in a lot of ways, fires that are older than 30 or 40 years don't matter as much. Fires that are younger than 20 or 30 years, that there's kind of a significant change in the fuel loading. Anyway, so webcams, just kind of watch these. They've got repellers they've lowered into some of these. They've got smoke jumpers. One of the fires that they were kind of most interested in this afternoon was burning up high. It's the Mildred. I'm not sure where that is, if it's on my map. But if you look at the webcam here from Serene Lakes, there was this fire that was burning kind of barely going down here. And I think that they put some smoke jumpers on that. You can see them dropping retardant. But so all in all today, doesn't mean that we're out of the woods completely if we have hot and dry and windy weather. Like, there's still a lot of kind of smoldering fire out there, and fires we don't even know about. And I guess one thing I would say is, like, you didn't notice me like saying we should let these lightning fires burn, right? Like, because of the location, right? Like, I know last week I was like talking about how I was kind of cranky that they were putting out all the lightning fires in the Dixie Fire. And I think it's useful to think of, when we look at the whole state of California, I think it's useful to think about, like, kind of zones where different rules apply, or different rules could apply, right? Right now, we have these kind of one set of rules for the whole state, and we're like, Forest Service is going to put out every fire, and that's that. And then we tend to get kind of into these arguments about, like, if letting fires burn is a good idea. But I suggest here we got one zone that's bounded by 395 and Highway 44 and Lassen Park and let's just say like Highway 70, the Bear Fire, right? We got basically the Bear and Dixie Fire area here, maybe a million acres. That's got like a huge amount of like high severity burn and places where there's opportunities to let lightning fires burn with like no intervention at all. And then you've got places like the Yuba where, like, no, you're not going to let fires burn here at all because it hasn't burned for 100 years and it's full of fuel. And then maybe you've got like the Klamath. Maybe you got the Mendocino August complex over here that's a million acres that burned largely hot in 2020, where you've got other opportunities to let fires burn. Then maybe you got the whole Klamath that's got its own kind of unique character and isolation and mix of fire history where you can evaluate and let fires burn. So that's an idea. And then maybe you say, like, and the rest of the state, all of this, like, no, we're not even going to talk about it, because XYZ. But the one place that has, and I'd say that one place in California where the Forest Service actually has been willing to use fire and let fires burn is on the Stanislaus National Forest. Oftentimes up here in this country where you've got a fire that's going to burn up into the rocks. And this is like the great Sierra Nevada fuel break, granite, nothing really to burn. So you get opportunities just based on geography, where, and the Park Service has done this really well. Like the red fire in Yosemite, like they basically just said, like, it's in this bowl, it's surrounded by rock, and we're going to let it burn because this land needs to burn, and it's not going anywhere. So there's opportunities all over the place where you've got kind of unique geography. And one thing I would say about the places that we're getting in trouble with, like, fires that are being managed for resource benefit, is like, if we look at the fire up a little earlier this year, Dragon Bravo. Dragon Bravo. Out here. So, like, here they said early on that they were going to try to manage this fire for resource benefits, but it had like a gazillion contiguous acres of fuel around it, and so there was no kind of natural compartmentalization of this landscape that would like help you contain a fire. And so the fire just gobbled everything. I ate it all. Dragon Bravo. Anyway, so we got to be strategic. Back to California. This is Dragon Bravo. Special guest. We need some help in the studio. We've got Dragon Bravo. The universe just kind of named him for us. All right, so like I said, not a whole lot to report. The only other thing before, I said we'd end up in the Klamath. So coming back over to so work our way north. We had a fire down here just outside Chico last night. Here's Chico. Here's Feather River Canyon, and fires. Here's the campfire from 2018. Here's the Dixie fire. Here's the Bear fire. So this fire that started yesterday up here, it started in the afternoon, evening, and on a bad spot, steep ground. Takes a while to get there. And the winds were kind of cranking, like this way. Feather River, kind of typical down canyon, northeast Feather River winds. And so the problem with that is down here you've got Magalia, what's left of Magalia that didn't burn in the campfire. And so the winds were basically blowing like straight from this fire to Magalia. And it's a little bit of a pucker because so I've done a lot of pre-fire planning work and modeling in this country where we take these computer models and we set the parameters, like here are the fuels, here's the weather, here's the time of year, here's the winds. And we run the model, and the model spits out a fire shape. It says, like, we're like, hey, let's let this fire burn for 5 days in the model and see what happens. And so in kind of looking at projects to protect Paradise and other places from wildfires that originate in a place that would take them out, I had modeled fires out here and, in this specific area, and they would do this. They would burn up what's left of Magalia. They would burn all the way to Chico. They burned Butte Creek Canyon. Forest Ranch is, if you look at our fire history layer here, Forest Ranch, we were talking yesterday about just how like there's this little window in Butte County upland that hasn't burned yet. That's pretty small when you look at like the whole county. We've got like this little, like 20% left of our forested foothill vegetation that hasn't burned. And so a start out here with these winds could also take out Forest Ranch, right? So this was, so last night they put water dropping night flying helicopters on it, and I was glad because it's just a bad spot to have a fire. And I think one thing that I think about a lot is we've got all these new night flying helicopters. We've got these C-130s. We've got money that we're spending on crews. We're spending money on fuels. And if we just kind of keep using that stuff for suppression, we're still going to keep losing towns because all of this stuff makes a huge difference. These night flying choppers, just the helicopters can carry more water now. They're faster. We've got more contract, like giant Chinook helicopters dropping water on fires. Like we're getting better and better at initial attack. But when the fire starts on a campfire type day, like we're not going to put it out. It's going to burn where there's fuel. And so I feel like with all this stuff, we have to take advantage of this. We're buying time with all this new suppression hardware and firepower to harden our towns. But if we're not using that same, like maybe we're buying 10 more years for Forest Ranch and Upper Magalia from not burning down. But unless we put equal amount of investment into thinning and burning and like really seriously preparing these towns that haven't burned down yet, like we're going to lose them. We can't just count on the new helicopters, new air tankers, the new technology of detecting fires, because we know that that's not enough to deal with a fire like the campfire that's, takes off with 70-mile-an-hour winds during a time of extended drought with record fuel, moisture, dryness. Right. So I'm glad that we've got this stuff. I'm glad that, we're not reporting today about how this fire has now become established and then seeing 3 days from now, some east winds blow it down and burn up Forest Ranch. Glad we got this stuff, but I still feel the sense of desperation that we have to keep focusing super heavy on mitigation because my dragon wants to eat your lunch. All right, working north, we got Post Mountain over here. A lot of my personal wounds are self-inflicted. I got kind of negative space yesterday talking about Post Mountain and telling people on the internet what I think about this place, and then just negativity, putting it out there. There's a lot of negativity, and so sometimes it feels good to vent, and other times just like I didn't really need that. Didn't really need to punch down on people who got a fire in their backyard. So Post Mountain, they put out the fire. Post Mountain lives to grow another 1 million pounds of weed. This place is crazy though. All I can say, you come in here and you look at this place, and someone sent me a link to the fire chief here was on my case for saying bad things about her community and saying that lots of normal people live here too who aren't growers, and this place is crazy. It just goes on and on like this. Like, anyway, Post Mountain, I guess the nickname is Compost Mountain. And I actually know a guy who has a nursery supply, like garden store in Weaverville, and I'm thinking that he probably does pretty good. But I just come in and look at like what the hell is all this stuff? Like there's a lot of shit out there that I would not want to be fighting fire around. Old trailers, old cars, plastic. Just it is really I mean, that was only a small part of it, right? We just flew over the place and we're like, holy shit, this place is crazy. And that was only like less than half of the area of Post Mountain. Anyway, Post Mountain, Northern California is a trip. And yeah, man, crazy. Making me dizzy just thinking about it. Okay, so anyway, they put that fire out. Back up to North Up. Got our rainbow fire history stripes here. Okay, so we're going to talk about the peak fire. So we're, here's Redding. Rancher Rob says they get all the water for the weed. The fire chief says they're all on wells. All over home designs. Yeah, we if you're just coming in, we covered that, so you can go back and watch it. Sometimes you feel like a nut. I do feel like a nut. Oftentimes, I am a nut, and I don't deny that. I think that's why you guys like me, right? Okay, so Post Mountain. Is it the dragon? Dragon, give me away. Here's Trinity Lake. Over here, the peak fire hasn't really spread much. My lines are too thick now here. All right, yeah, peak is not really doing much here. It's now in a complex with this other fire here there's no clouds. There's clouds over last night, so we couldn't see what's happening. If we go over here, this fire over here, the root fire burning above Dunsmuir, they put it out pretty much. Like it's still got a little bit of intense heat, but they got really aggressive, got line around a bunch of it, and they're trying to get line now, finish line around the north side of it. All in all, today this fire was pretty subdued. Also, it's nice that it didn't get blasted with winds. That thunderstorm we had just kind of really chopped up and crazified the weather yesterday. So so far so good. Root fire's looking good. So that leaves us with the fires in the Klamath pretty much. And so if you didn't watch this last night, we had Jamie on, Jamie Allen, and we talked about the over here around Syed Valley off Highway 96. We talked about the blue fire, which is burning kind of right in his backyard. And blue hasn't grown that much in the last couple of days. Like it's continually growing in all directions. But last night's infrared showed, the white line is 24 hours of growth. And so the fire had kind of was growing steadily in most directions where it had fuel available. Along this end here, I think it's Thompson Creek, the fire hadn't spread. I think it backed into some like riparian areas here. So you see these red areas outside the white lines are kind of the spread of the fire. If you're interested in fire ecology and kind of the science of how these fires are affecting the landscape, watch our episode last night with Jamie Allen. He lives here. He grew up here. He's a biologist, and he's just got a huge amount of experience and time spent kind of tromping around this landscape, thinking about what he's seeing. And so I recommend checking that out. So yeah, this fire is just kind of, there's little spots out there in front of it, and it's going to continue. Like they're not going to probably put this fire out in this basin here, right? It's likely that the fire is going to burn until it rains, burn a large area. And that might not, if you watch our episode last night, that might not be the worst thing for this landscape. One thing we did talk about last night was the severity of this previous fire in 2014. I know that looks a little weird, but basically, this is a mapping of how hot the last fire burned 12 years ago, 11 years ago. And so what we talked about last night is just that patchwork of past severity affects what's there now and what's there to burn. And so I recommend checking out our conversation. Okay, so we're going to jump over now and check out the Dillon fire. This is the fire that was threatening my friend's home a couple days ago, last week. And this fire is interesting. There's a few things that are kind of interesting going on in Dillon, where you can see kind of what they're doing for firefighting, kind of the strategy here. So this fire started down in here about a week ago, and it ran up right away it ran up this mountain and it spotted over the other side, and it ran up the other side. And so the white line is the growth from the night before last. This is my friend's house, the place I was worried about, T-Bar. And the fire, you can see the fire went right up to their property line and it slopped into their meadow. But it was held out of the communities here, and a lot of amazing work got done to make that happen. So since then, the fire is kind of cooling off where it initially burned, but it is kind of slowly chewing its way here into the backcountry. And so this white line is that 24-hour growth, and you can see that there's no growth along this road system here because they put fire on the ground out in here over the past couple of days. So if we look at kind of this red line from the night of the 1st, you can see that firefighters, they had time and they prepped this ridge. And there was, I think, a dozer line on this ridge, and so then they fired off of it. So this heat perimeter you're seeing here, this is all created. This part of the fire is created on purpose. They lit it out ahead of the main fire, and they kind of used various means to give it what we call some depth. And then by the next night, they had more depth. And so this is how we fight big backcountry fires. We put fire on the ground, we prep indirect lines, we fire it off. And like I said before, by getting fire that backs down the hill instead of running up the hill, oftentimes, like this area that the fire is burning in has burned in the past in 2008. And all these trees that are here now survived that previous fire. If we look at the fire history here, you can see that this whole fire area is in a big fire that happened in 2008, the mill fire, and that a lot of trees survived that fire. And so they're doing kind of this, what we call indirect attack. And what you see also is that out here to the north, like it looks like maybe that isn't working. I can't really tell. But yeah, so out here, the fire kind of, they weren't able to contain it along the top here. Like it pushed up basically from here to here happened in a day. And it came out when it crossed the creek down. So this is 2 nights ago. It crossed the creek. And then yesterday it ran hard up at this ridge, and it wasn't safe for them, or they didn't have time to light this ridge off. You know, if they'd had another day before this fire crossed the river here, or this drainage, potentially they could have continued their firing show. You can see that there's an old dozer line down this ridge. They could have continued their firing show down and potentially tied in this whole side of the fire. But the fire kind of sets the tempo. And so now we've got this part of the fire is kind of uncontained. This part, as we come back, is looking better. This part here is like, this part of the fire is done spreading, but the fire is out in here. And so who knows, maybe the fire will eventually burn up here and come back over here. You never really know. Same here, like this part of the fire is not boxed in. So it's pretty typical indirect attack. You can see here the fire has, like, the latest perimeters, the fire is spotted out into this area out here. So the thing about all this country is that, like, no one lives out here on the other side of the river, and this area here burned in 2023. So like they've contained this part here, which would go into an area that hasn't burned for a while. But this part here is almost basically contained from the get-go by this fire that's only 2 years old. Same on the other side of the river. This is 2023 Elliott fire. Like, there's no real worry about this area burning. Like, there's some spots, but they're not really doing much. There's been some new spot fires on this side of the river, but they were on another ridge and they haven't done that much. And that area also burned 8 years ago. So this is fire in the Klamath. It's complex. The people that come out here and fight fires on the incident command teams, like a lot of them have been coming here for their whole careers. So oftentimes they're up on a ridge putting in a dozer line, and they're like, oh, I was here 20 years ago putting this dozer line in, or I was 17 years ago, I put this dozer line in the 2008 fires. So there's a lot of that kind of knowledge that is held by people from all over the state and all over the country. Like incident command teams that come and work here have members that are from LA or from San Bernardino or from Utah. And a lot of those folks, people move around a lot in Fed Fire, but a lot of them too, just they're like back to the Klamath, like my home away from home. All right, so that's Dylan. There's another fire here that's kind of interesting. It's the log fire, and the log fire is burning. So just kind of, if you're just joining us, we're looking at fire history here, and here's Eureka, and over here's Wairika, and in between is Klamath. So we're kind of basically like, I don't know, 60 or 70 miles west of Mount Shasta. Yeah, 70 miles to Soames Bar on Highway 96, which is kind of the only road through the Klamath Mountains that's really would be considered drivable by most civilized people. All right, so the log fire here is interesting. Basically, this fire started during the same time as like the peak fire, and they didn't staff it, and they didn't brag about that. You know, like we talk a lot about the Klamath and why don't they take credit for just letting fires burn that are doing the right thing. So the log has been very low profile in kind of the public relations side of the firefighting effort, but it's just kind of backed down, and it's backing into an area where the Hancock fire. So this area here burned 2 years ago, and a lot of us at that time were like, I had some good friends that were assigned to this Hancock fire, and they were like flying them in, and like basically this fire, Hancock was burning, surrounded by an area that had burned 2 years prior. And so a lot of people are like, hey, how come you don't just let that burn in then? Fill in this gap, focus on, other things. Like, I mean, there was a lot of fire going on in 2023, but they expended a lot of energy and flew a lot of people in and expended a lot of risk basically to put this fire out, to keep it small. They could have let it burn out to the 6-year-old burn scar at that time, which probably would have held it. And then this fire wouldn't be happening at all. So there's a lot of this kind of weird stuff that happens where you spend a ton of energy to like put out a fire that was already relatively contained by the fuels of the previous burns. And then all that does is mean that you have to come back and spend more money the next year. If you were and they would be putting this fire out if they had more resources, but because they're short on hotshot crews, short on helicopters, they're not going to, if they call and say like, hey, I want 3 hotshot crews and I want to fly them in here to put out this little fire, they're not going to get them. I think they might have some crews on it now, but for the first few days they didn't. So that's the log fire. It's just part of the kind of ongoing interesting story of fire in the Klamath. And then the last thing I want to say while we're in the Klamath is this. Here is the Butler fire, and this burned in the beginning of this summer. And I've got some imagery here of what it looks like post-fire as far as severity goes. And I've already shared this a few times this year, but I thought it was worth bringing up again. That is if we can find it. No guarantee. There we go. So this is some of our trusty satellite imagery, and it's just showing this fire, the Butler fire. You can go back and watch our videos, but we covered it. It started in lightning in the beginning of July, and it slowly kind of backed its way through this area that was a 11 or 12-year-old burn area. And so you see this kind of mixed severity here, where the fire burned hot in some places and at other places it didn't. And then when you dial that down, you see that it burned hot in these areas that burned hot last time, the brush fields, and that the fire, when it got to places where there are trees left from that survived the last fire, the fire kind of underburned those because the last fire cleaned up under those trees, and the trees were hardened enough and resilient enough, and their branches were high enough off the ground that they survived. So, when we talk about like fire on fire and this era of reburns, this satellite imagery is a really good way to visualize what I'm talking about, which is basically that areas that burn hot and turn to brush, oftentimes the next fire will burn the brush hot and it'll be brush again. In areas that burn cooler and still have conifers, oftentimes they will survive the next fire. And the longer that you keep fire off these landscapes, the more likely that the next fire you get is going to kill all the conifers too. So that's why we say, like, man, it's important to get fire back into these burnt landscapes, in the first decade if you can. Because if you wait, 20 years, like, you might just have it all be a brush field, which is, like, most of us don't want that to happen. All right. Well, that's about it. I'm going to end as I do usually by telling you to check out our website. We've got some of this. We got a little bit of info on this tea kettle burn. If you want to see those images again of how the tea kettle was burning hotter than Hades yesterday at noon. This green area is the tea kettle forest, experimental forest. So yeah, we got a little write up on that as today's article. On the lookout. And on Friday, I'm going to interview the project manager that was trying to get this project done before the fire happened over the last several years, and my friend Bethany Hanna, who also used to work for the outfit, but that got the grant to try to do the burn. So we're going to talk to them on Friday. There's some info on that project here. And we've got notes from our conversation yesterday with Jamie Allen about the fire ecology of the Klamath and reburns. But basically, this is our archive. So we recommend, if you like reading, you want to learn more about this stuff, check it out. We got a tool raffle going on right now for some really nice pruning saws, firewood tools, picaroon that I made that I hope you want to whack into your firewood pile and move logs around with. Nice loggers tape. More saws. So you can buy that. Look out fundraiser. You can buy merch. Check out our website. Also got some good stuff on here. Interviews. People we've talked to that are smart and have interesting things to say about land management. I highly recommend checking out the interview with Jim Klump, elder, one of my mentors. Amazing. Check that out. Proud of it. All right. That's it. I also have a link here to our new movie, Danger in Plain Sight, LA kind of fire hazards in LA. And all 5 episodes of that are out too. So if you want to check those out, I recommend watching them 1 through 5. And we're going to end with the funk since we came in with the country. But appreciate you guys supporting the Lookout. So thanks for being part of this.